It all began on a rainy Tuesday evening when Anna, a single mother of two, sat in the dim light of her tiny apartment, her phone trembling in her hands. The refrigerator was empty, her youngest cried for formula, and the weight of the world seemed to crush her chest. Desperation made her fingers fly across the screen, punching in the number of a distant cousin she thought might help. Her message was simple, raw, and heartbreaking. I don't even have enough for baby formula. Please, if you can send a little, I'll pay you back somehow. She hit send without double-checking the number. Miles away, in a glass tower piercing the night sky, billionaire Adrian Cole sat in his office. The world knew him as ruthless in business, a man who crushed competitors like insects. What no one saw was how empty that office felt when the city lights blinked back at him. When his phone buzzed with a message, he almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Reading those words, his brow furrowed. No one ever texted him like that. People only came with contracts, deals, or schemes. This was something else. He read it again. Baby formula. A mother begging. A stranger. Instead of deleting it, Adrian typed back 2 words. Who is this? Anna's heart nearly stopped when she saw the reply. She quickly realized she must have misdialed. Embarrassed, she wrote back, I'm sorry. Wrong number. Please ignore. But Adrian didn't ignore. Something about her words gnawed at him. He asked her name. She hesitated, then typed it. One question led to another until, against all odds, a conversation unfolded. She never once asked for money again, but her quiet dignity, her refusal to complain, painted a picture more powerful than begging ever could. The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside Anna's crumbling apartment building. She froze at the window, clutching her baby close. A man stepped out, tall, commanding, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her year's rent. It was him. Adrian Cole. Her door knocked. When she opened it, she expected judgment in his eyes, maybe pity. Instead, there was something else, an odd mix of curiosity and respect. You're real, he said softly, almost to himself. Anna stammered, embarrassed by the peeling paint and broken furniture. But Adrian didn't seem to notice. His gaze was fixed on her children. The baby cooed, reaching a tiny hand toward him. Something in Adrian's chest shifted. For a man who had built empires, who had silenced boardrooms with a single word, he suddenly found himself speechless before a child. I don't know why I'm here, Adrian admitted. But your message, it stayed with me. Anna didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to shut the door, to protect herself from disappointment. But another part, the part that had prayed for a miracle, whispered that maybe this wasn't an accident at all. And so began the strangest friendship. Adrian would drop by quietly, sometimes late at night after meetings, bringing groceries or toys, pretending it was nothing. Anna, proud and wary, never asked for more than he offered. Slowly, conversations grew longer. She teased him for not knowing how to hold a baby bottle, and he surprised himself by laughing, really laughing, for the first time in years. But not everyone around Adrian approved. Whispers spread in his company. Who was this woman in the shabby apartment, this mother with no pedigree or power? His advisors warned him, associations like this could ruin his reputation. Competitors sneered, waiting for his first mistake. Yet the more the world pushed back, the closer Adrian drew to Anna and her children. He began to see in her something he never found in billion-dollar contracts: honesty, resilience, and a heart unshaken by greed. One night, as a storm howled outside and the city lights flickered, Adrian sat across from Anna in her tiny kitchen. You don't understand, he said quietly. You think you're the one who needed saving. But it's me. I've been alone for so long I forgot what real looks like. Anna blinked, stunned. The billionaire who ruled boardrooms like a king was sitting at her table, vulnerable, almost broken. And in that moment, something shifted between them, something neither of them had dared to name before. But fate, as always, had its own plans. Because the very next day, a headline splashed across every newspaper. Billionaire Adrian Cole spotted with unknown woman and children. Who is she? The world was watching now, and for the first time, Anna's quiet life was no longer her own. Panic rose in Anna's chest when she saw the newspapers. Neighbors were already whispering outside, leaning on their doorframes, pretending to sweep their stoops while their eyes darted toward her window. She clutched her phone, scrolling through the endless storm of gossip online. Strangers dissected her life as though they knew her, calling her a gold digger, a scammer, an opportunist who had somehow lured the untouchable Adrian Cole into her orbit. She hadn't asked for any of this. One wrong number, that's all it had been. Now the world wanted a spectacle. Adrian arrived later that afternoon. His car drew a crowd, cameras flashing, journalists shoving microphones. He walked through it all with the same calm stride he used when entering boardrooms, his jaw tight but his eyes only searching for hers. When she opened the door, trembling, he stepped in and shut out the chaos with one decisive click of the lock. "They know," she whispered, almost ashamed. "They were always going to know," he replied, taking off his coat, his voice steady. "The problem isn't that they found out. The problem is what they'll try to make of it." Anna sat at the edge of her worn sofa, her children playing on the floor with blocks Adrian had brought last week. She kept her hands tightly folded in her lap, afraid to meet his gaze. "I can't give them what they want," she murmured. "I'm not part of your world. I don't belong in those headlines." Adrian studied her, a storm brewing behind his sharp eyes. "Maybe you don't belong in their world," he said finally. "But neither do I. I just forgot that until you reminded me." That night, he stayed longer than usual. He helped bathe the children, awkwardly holding the baby in a towel, his expensive watch dripping with water. Anna laughed despite the tension, a sound that seemed to ease something in him. For a brief, fragile moment, the noise of the outside world faded, and the kitchen filled only with the scent of warm milk and the sound of children's laughter. But peace never lasts. The following week, Adrian's board of directors staged a confrontation. They sat around the polished oak table, gray suits gleaming under the sterile lights. One of them leaned forward, voice sharp. "Your association with this woman is reckless. Investors are nervous. We need assurances. Either you end this distraction, or you step aside." Adrian didn't flinch. He looked each of them in the eye, then said simply, "If the company can't survive my humanity, then perhaps it doesn't deserve to survive." Gasps filled the room, but his words were final. He walked out, leaving a trail of stunned silence behind him. Meanwhile, Anna faced her own battles. Reporters lurked outside her building, thrusting cameras at her whenever she stepped out for groceries. Parents at the local playground whispered as she passed, their eyes filled with suspicion. Her children, too young to understand, only sensed the tension in her voice and the way she held them tighter. One evening, after another long day of hiding from the world, she found Adrian waiting at her door, holding a paper bag of takeout. He smiled, almost sheepish. "I thought maybe you hadn't eaten," he said. She let him in, and they sat together on the floor, eating noodles from cartons while the children built castles out of plastic cups. "They hate me," Anna confessed suddenly, setting down her fork. "I'm just some nobody to them, and they'll never let me forget it." Adrian leaned closer, his voice low, deliberate. "Do you know what they fear more than anything? Someone who doesn't play their game. You don't need their approval. You never did. That's why they hate you. You remind them of everything money can't buy." For the first time, Anna didn't feel like a victim of circumstance. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she had something even the most powerful couldn't touch. But the story didn't stop there. As the media frenzy grew, so did the questions. Who was the father of her children? Why had Adrian chosen her, of all people? Conspiracies spread, some claiming she was part of an elaborate scam, others spinning wild tales about secret inheritances or hidden connections. Adrian could ignore the rumors, but Anna could not. Each headline felt like another stone hurled at her already fragile life. And yet, in the eye of that storm, their bond deepened. He started inviting her to his world, not the glittering galas or charity balls, but the hidden corners. A late-night walk through an art gallery he'd rented out just for her. A quiet drive to the outskirts of the city, where he showed her the house he grew up in before money erased every trace of who he once was. She began to see the man beneath the armor, the one who had built walls so high he'd forgotten how to climb them down. One night, standing in the dim glow of a street lamp outside her apartment, Adrian said something that left her breathless. "Anna, every choice I've ever made was about power. But the moment I met you, I realized I had none at all. You undo me. She wanted to answer, but words failed. Instead, she simply reached out and took his hand. His fingers tightened around hers as though, for the first time in his life, he'd found something he didn't want to let go of. The world, however, wasn't ready to let them be. A week later, a photograph surfaced, Adrian carrying Anna's baby, his expression softer than anyone had ever seen. The picture went viral within hours, shattering the cold, untouchable image he'd spent years cultivating. Investors panicked again, tabloids went wild, and social media erupted with both outrage and adoration. Some called it a scandal, others a love story unfolding before their eyes. Anna watched the chaos unfold with dread, but when Adrian arrived at her apartment, he was smiling, almost relieved. "Let them see," he said. "For once, let them see the truth." But truth has consequences. Behind the smiles and whispered confessions, powerful enemies were circling. Men who had envied Adrian's empire saw weakness now, an opportunity to strike. Competitors prepared their moves, and even those closest to him questioned whether his heart was worth the risk. And Anna, caught in the center of it all, began to wonder if she had the strength to stand beside a man the world refused to leave unchallenged. Every time she looked at her children, she asked herself the same question. Was this miracle she'd stumbled into a blessing, or the beginning of a storm she wasn't strong enough to survive? The storm outside seemed to echo the one inside Anna's heart. Rain battered against the windowpane that night as she lay awake, staring at the ceiling while her children slept peacefully beside her. She thought about the photograph, the frenzy, the way the world had twisted something tender into a public spectacle. She had never asked for fame, never craved attention, yet now every move she made seemed to be measured, dissected, and consumed by strangers who would never know her name beyond the headlines. She rolled onto her side, checking her phone. Messages from unknown numbers filled her inbox. Some cruel, spitting venom about how she had trapped a billionaire. Others oddly supportive, strangers urging her to stay strong, calling her an inspiration. She read them in silence, unsure what to believe. All she knew was that her world was no longer her own. The next morning, Adrian appeared again, his presence as calm as a lighthouse cutting through the storm. He was dressed casually this time, no tailored suit, no gleaming shoes, just jeans and a dark sweater. Still, he carried the kind of gravity that made the entire hallway fall silent when he walked down it. He didn't speak until he was inside her apartment, until the door clicked shut behind them. "They're making calls," he said, his voice low. "Business rivals, investors, even politicians. They want me to walk away from you." Anna swallowed hard. "And what did you tell them?" "That they don't own me." His eyes burned with defiance, but beneath the fire she could see the exhaustion. He had been fighting battles she couldn't even imagine, all for the sake of something that had started as a wrong number on her phone. "Adrian," she whispered, sitting down at the kitchen table, "maybe they're right. Maybe you don't need this kind of trouble. I can't give you anything compared to what you're risking." He sat across from her, leaning forward until his hands covered hers. His touch was steady, grounding. "Anna, I've spent my life surrounded by people who pretended to care. And not one of them ever saw me. You did. That's worth more than anything they can threaten me with." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let those words wrap around her like armor, but the weight of her children's lives pressed against her heart. She couldn't let them become casualties in a war they never asked for. The days blurred into weeks. Adrian's visits became both a comfort and a risk. Every time he arrived, photographers swarmed, their lenses like predators. Anna learned to draw her curtains tight, to shield her children from the flashing lights. She cooked meals with Adrian at her side, watched him awkwardly attempt bedtime stories, laughed when he mispronounced cartoon characters' names. These small, ordinary moments began to feel like treasures buried deep within the chaos, proof that something real was blossoming in the shadow of scandal. But the world refused to give them peace. One evening, as Anna returned from the grocery store with her children in tow, she found a stranger waiting at her door. A woman, sharp-eyed and immaculately dressed, holding a leather folder. "Miss Williams?" the woman asked crisply. Anna shifted her bag of groceries nervously. "Yes." The woman handed her a card. "I represent a group with significant interests in Mr. Cole's enterprises. We'd like to discuss your situation." It wasn't a request. Inside, The woman spoke in clipped tones, laying out a neat, polished version of threats. If Anna truly cared for Adrian, she would step back. She would disappear quietly, leave him free to repair the damage to his empire. In exchange, she would be provided for, generously. Enough money to secure her children's future, to vanish from the scrutiny forever. Anna sat frozen, her heart hammering. The offer glittered before her like temptation itself. She imagined her children safe, secure, never hungry again. But the cost of that security was walking away from the only man who had ever looked at her without judgment, the man who had stepped into her world without hesitation. When Adrian arrived later that night, she was still trembling, the business card clenched in her hand. He saw it immediately, his jaw tightening as he read the name. "They came to you. They said I should leave," Anna admitted, her voice breaking. "That if I really care about you, I'd go. They offered me money, Adrian. More than I could ever dream of." His hands balled into fists. "They think they can buy you off like everyone else. That's how this world works to them. Everything has a price. But you don't." Tears burned in her eyes. "How do you know?" "I thought about it, Adrian. For my kids. I thought about saying yes." Silence hung heavy between them. Then he stepped forward, lifting her chin so she was forced to meet his gaze. "Thinking about it doesn't make you weak. It makes you a mother. But you didn't say yes. That's the difference." She broke then, collapsing against him, the weight of her fear spilling out in sobs. He held her, steady and unyielding, as though he could shield her from the whole ruthless world. But the world had claws, and it was relentless. The next day, tabloids printed cruel lies, claims that Anna had a criminal record, that she had schemed to entrap him, that her children were not even hers. Photos of her old beat-up apartment splashed across glossy covers, mocked as evidence of her unworthiness. She avoided the news, but whispers reached her anyway. At the grocery store, at the playground, in the schoolyard. People stared. Some with pity, others with judgment. Adrian, furious, launched lawsuits against the publications, but it only fanned the flames. To his enemies, his outrage was proof he was compromised, distracted. His stock wavered, his competitors circled closer, and still, he refused to walk away. One evening, after another exhausting day of hiding from reporters, Anna found herself standing at her window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Adrian sat at her table with her son on his lap, patiently helping him stack blocks. The sight pierced her chest. A man worth billions of dollars, a man who could have been anywhere in the world, sat quietly in her small apartment, focused only on her child's laughter. She realized then that no money, no promise of security, could compare to the gift she had been given, someone who chose to stay. Someone who chose them. But she also knew the storm wasn't over. It was only growing. And as much as her heart longed to hold on to the fragile happiness they'd built, she feared what might come next, when the enemies outside decided kindness and love were weaknesses to exploit. Her phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. Anna hesitated before picking it up, pressing it to her ear. A voice, low and dangerous, slid through the line. "You think this is a fairy tale, Miss Williams. But fairy tales don't end well in our world. Walk away from Adrian Cole, or we'll make sure you regret it." Her blood ran cold, her hand tightening around the phone as she turned to look at Adrian, still sitting there, smiling gently at her child. She didn't know how much danger they were truly in, only that the walls were closing in faster than either of them could stop. Anna's fingers trembled as she set the phone down, her pulse racing so loud she could hear it in her ears. The threat clung to her like smoke, thick and suffocating. She wanted to scream, to grab her children and run, but her legs wouldn't move. She turned her eyes toward Adrian. He looked so out of place in her small apartment, the dim lamp casting a soft glow on his face as he patiently balanced blocks with her son. There was no sign he sensed the shadow looming just beyond their fragile peace. She forced a smile for the children's sake, but when Adrian finally tucked them into bed, she told him everything: the call, the threat, the voice that seemed to carry a promise of violence. Adrian's expression darkened. He listened in silence, his jaw tightening with every word. When she finished, he reached across the table and gripped her hand. "They won't touch you," he said firmly. "Not while I'm here." "You don't understand," Anna whispered. These people aren't like the board members in suits who make veiled threats in offices. This was different. This was, she stopped, searching for the right word, dangerous. I've dealt with dangerous men before, Adrian replied. Money attracts them like flies. But they don't scare me, and I won't let them scare you. Her chest ached at his confidence, but she couldn't shake the fear. She had lived her life in quiet survival, stretching every dollar, protecting her children from hardship. She knew danger when it was real, and this was no idle threat. The following days blurred into tension. Adrian arranged for security, men in black suits stationed outside the building, watching every passerby with sharp eyes. To Anna, it felt like her home had become a fortress. Her neighbors stared more than ever, whispering behind curtains, pointing whenever she left the apartment. The air felt heavy with judgment and curiosity. One night, as rain drummed softly against the window, she sat with Adrian in the kitchen while the children slept. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence between them. She finally asked the question that had been clawing at her mind. "Why are you doing this for me?" Adrian looked up from his untouched cup of coffee. "Because I want to." "That's not enough," she said, her voice trembling. "You're risking everything. Your company, your reputation, your life even." "Why?" He leaned back in his chair, eyes steady on hers. "Because when I'm here, I feel alive. Do you know what my life was before you? Endless meetings, hollow victories, fake smiles. And then your message came. A mistake, you said. But it wasn't. It was the first real thing that's happened to me in years. I'm not giving that up." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, that his presence had brought warmth into her cold, struggling life. But fear gripped her tongue. Because love, she realized, wasn't just a gift, it was a weapon in the hands of those who wanted to hurt him. A week later, the threat materialized in ways she couldn't ignore. She returned from the grocery store to find her front door ajar. Panic surged through her chest as she pushed it open. The apartment looked untouched at first, but as she moved through the rooms, she saw it. The children's toys scattered unnaturally, drawers pulled open, her few possessions rifled through. Her babies, thank God, were safe at the neighbors for the afternoon, but the violation was clear. Someone had been inside her sanctuary. Adrian arrived minutes after she called him, his face a mask of fury. He examined the rooms, his security detail swarming the building, but the intruders were long gone. On the living room wall, drawn in thick black marker, were 2 words, "Walk away." Anna sat shaking on the sofa, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Adrian knelt in front of her, his voice low but fierce. "This is my fault. They're trying to scare you because of me. But I swear, Anna, I'll keep you safe." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "And what if you can't? What if next time they don't just leave words on a wall?" His eyes softened, and for the first time, she saw fear in him, not for himself, but for her. He reached up, cupping her face in his hands. "Then we face it together. I don't care what they throw at me. I won't lose you." That night, he refused to leave her side. He stayed until dawn, pacing the apartment like a restless guardian, his eyes never leaving the door. Anna lay awake, listening to the sound of his footsteps, torn between terror and the strange comfort of knowing he was there. But outside, the city buzzed with more rumors. Newspapers spun the break-in into a spectacle, claiming it was staged for sympathy, another ploy in what they painted as a twisted love affair. Online commentators dissected her every move, turning her life into fodder for entertainment. Adrian's company stock dipped further, his enemies circling closer. One evening, as the children colored at the table, Adrian stood by the window, staring out at the flashing lights of paparazzi cameras below. "They won't stop," he said quietly. "Not until they've broken us." Anna set down the crayons, her heart heavy. "Then maybe I should go. Maybe if I disappear, they'll leave you alone." He turned sharply, his voice cutting through the room. "No. Don't you dare think like that. I've lived my life with everything money can buy, and none of it mattered. You matter. If I lose you, I lose everything." Her breath caught, the weight of his words pressing against her chest. She wanted to believe they could withstand the storm, that love was strong enough to fight back against greed and power. But in her heart, she knew storms didn't ask for permission, They destroyed whatever lay in their path. That night, after Adrian left reluctantly for a late meeting, Anna stood at the window, watching the city pulse below. She thought of the voice on the phone, the words on her wall, the fear etched into her every waking moment. She thought of her children, their small hands reaching for her in the dark. She whispered to the night, to no one in particular, "How much more can we take?" The city gave no answer. Only the hum of traffic, the distant wail of sirens, and the knowledge that somewhere out there, forces far bigger than her were moving pieces on a board she had never asked to play on. And in that silence, with her heart pounding and shadows creeping closer, Anna realized something. The real battle wasn't just about protecting her children or surviving the storm. It was about choosing whether to fight for the love that had come to her by accident, or to let it slip away before the world ripped it from her hands. The night the storm broke, the city seemed to hold its breath. Rain lashed against glass towers, lightning split the sky, and in a quiet apartment on the edge of the metropolis, Anna sat at her table with Adrian across from her. The children were asleep, their soft breathing a fragile rhythm in the silence. The weight of weeks, threats, whispers, fear, hung between them like an invisible chain. Anna looked at him, this man who had stepped out of another world into hers. The billionaire with a fortress of power, the man who could silence boardrooms with a single word, now sat in her kitchen with sleeves rolled up, exhaustion etched into his face. Yet beneath the weariness was a fire that hadn't dimmed. He reached across the table, took her hand, and said quietly, "Anna, I can fight them all. But only if you'll stand with me. If you walk away, they win." Her eyes filled with tears. She had wrestled with this decision in the shadows of sleepless nights. To stay meant danger. To leave meant breaking something rare, something she had thought only existed in fairy tales. She had lived her whole life surviving, but never living. And now, staring at him, she realized survival wasn't enough anymore. The next morning, Adrian made his move. He called a press conference, one that the world couldn't ignore. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, the hall packed with power brokers and vultures eager to watch him fall. Adrian stood before them, the weight of expectation pressing against his chest, and began to speak. "For years, you've painted me as untouchable," he said, his voice steady, carrying across the room. "A man who cared only for money, for power, for control. You were right about one thing, I built empires. But you were wrong about what I wanted. I never wanted wealth. I wanted meaning. And I found it, not in boardrooms, not in contracts, but in a place none of you would look, an apartment where a mother fought every day to keep her children fed. A woman who asked for nothing, even when she had nothing. That woman's name is Anna Williams. And if loving her costs me everything you think matters, then I welcome the loss." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions, the frenzy erupting like wildfire. Some laughed, some sneered, but others heard truth in his words, a truth they couldn't twist. Anna watched from her apartment, tears streaming down her face as the broadcast filled the small living room. Her children clapped, too young to understand the gravity of it, but sensing the joy in their mother's eyes. For the first time, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt seen. The backlash was immediate. Stock prices wavered, critics sharpened their knives, enemies doubled their efforts. But something else happened too. Messages poured in, not of hate, but of hope. Ordinary people who had been invisible their whole lives saw themselves in Anna's story. They rallied behind her, behind them, a tidal wave of voices rising above the noise of greed. But the battle wasn't over. The same night, Adrian received another call, darker than before. The voice hissed through the phone, "You've embarrassed us. This isn't a love story. This is a war. Walk away from her, or you'll watch her pay the price." He hung up without responding, but the threat lingered like a shadow. He doubled the security around Anna's home, refused to leave her side, yet knew that money could only build so many walls. They were being pushed into a corner, and corners make people dangerous. Then came the night everything changed. Adrian had taken Anna and the children out of the city, to a secluded estate where he thought they'd be safe. The air was crisp, the stars clear above them, and for a moment it felt like peace might be possible. But danger doesn't respect distance. A fire broke out at the edge of the property, spreading fast. Security scrambled, sirens blared, chaos erupted. Anna clutched her children, heart pounding, as Adrian pulled them toward safety. Flames licked at the night sky, smoke choking the air. In the panic, Anna stumbled, nearly losing her grip on the baby. Adrian turned, scooped the child into his arms, and shouted over the roar of the fire, "Run, Anna! Don't look back!" But she didn't run. She grabbed his hand instead, refusing to let go. "We stay together!" she cried, her voice fierce, defiant against the crackling blaze. Together they pushed through the smoke, coughing, stumbling, until at last the cool night air hit their faces. They collapsed on the grass, the children clinging to them, the fire raging behind. Security vehicles swarmed, firefighters charged in, but all Anna saw was Adrian's face lit by the flames, his eyes locked on hers. "You should have run," he whispered, half smiling despite the soot on his skin. "And leave you," she shot back. "Never." That moment, captured by a distant photographer's lens, spread across the world. Not as scandal, not as gossip, but as something else, an image of two people, hand in hand, protecting what mattered most in the face of everything. The narrative shifted. No longer was Anna painted as a schemer or a burden. She became a symbol of resilience, of love that refused to bow to power. Adrian, once feared for his ruthlessness, was now seen through a new lens, a man willing to risk everything for something greater than himself. Weeks passed. The threats grew quieter, shadows retreating as public opinion turned in their favor. Investors who had once wavered now saw strength in Adrian's defiance, humanity in his choice. The empire he'd built didn't crumble, it transformed. He poured resources into programs for families like Anna's, shelters, education, opportunities that money had long ignored. His rivals sneered, but the people rallied, and in the end, it was the people who gave him a strength no boardroom could. For Anna, life didn't suddenly become easy. There were still whispers, still eyes watching, still the constant hum of attention she had never wanted. But now, when she looked at Adrian, when she watched her children laugh in his arms, she knew she had chosen right. One evening, long after the fires of scandal had cooled, they sat together on the balcony of Adrian's penthouse. The city glittered beneath them, alive with a million stories. Anna leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. He turned to her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "The only thing I regret is that I didn't meet you sooner." Her heart swelled, the weight of everything they had endured pressing down and lifting all at once. She thought of the night she sent that accidental text, the night desperation led her fingers to the wrong number. A mistake, she had thought then. But now, she knew better. There are no mistakes in love. Only miracles disguised as accidents. And as the night wrapped around them, the city lights shimmering like stars below, Anna realized her story had never been about survival alone. It was about courage. About choosing love in a world that tried to buy and sell everything. About holding on, even when the storm threatened to tear them apart. Her children slept peacefully in the room behind them, their future no longer uncertain but bright, filled with promise. Adrian's hand found hers, strong, steady, unshaken. She looked at him, the man who had walked out of a world of steel and glass into hers, and she smiled. Because sometimes, the greatest fortunes aren't built in boardrooms or vaults, but in the fragile, unbreakable bond between two souls who refuse to let go. And so their story, born of a wrong number on a desperate night, became something larger than either of them had ever imagined, a testament that love, when it is real, can withstand fire, fury, and the weight of the world itself. The storm had not ended. Storms never truly do. But together, they had learned how to walk through it, hand in hand, unafraid.